The cardinals stepped back when Dr. Patricia Anderson began dismantling the altar where pilgrims claimed to see the Virgin Mary appear each morning. Her instruments scraped against marble that had stood for centuries, measuring electromagnetic fields and temperature variations while a dozen Vatican officials watched in stunned silence. She worked with methodical precision, photographing every angle, collecting dust samples from the base, where witnesses swore they saw luminous footprints. Cardinal Benedetti cleared his throat nervously. The other clergy exchanged glances as Patricia continued her investigation, treating their most sacred space like a crime scene. She had arrived from Rome with credentials that impressed even the Pope's advisors, a scientist with 3 degrees and a reputation for debunking religious phenomena across Europe. Her secular approach to their reported miracle felt like watching someone dissect a butterfly to understand its beauty. The morning light streamed through stained glass windows, casting colored shadows across Patricia's equipment as she worked, completely focused on finding rational explanations for what hundreds of faithful visitors had witnessed with their own eyes during the past month. Patricia reached for her electromagnetic scanner when the marble beneath her hands began to warm. The temperature gauge spiked beyond normal readings as a gentle luminescence emanated from the altar stone itself. Her equipment started malfunctioning, screens flickering with impossible data, while the surrounding air filled with the scent of roses despite no flowers being present. Cardinal Benedetti fell to his knees as the luminous outline of a figure appeared directly where Patricia had been working, forcing her to step backward in scientific disbelief. The apparition remained visible for 30 seconds, witnessed by every person in the chapel, while Patricia's cameras captured nothing but light anomalies her instruments couldn't explain. When the vision faded, her electromagnetic reader displayed readings that violated every law of physics she understood. The marble altar showed no damage from her investigation, appearing somehow restored to pristine condition. Patricia stared at her equipment, then at the dozen witnesses whose faces reflected awe and reverence she couldn't dismiss as mass hallucination. Her hands trembled as she packed her instruments, the rational explanations she had prepared crumbling against what she had experienced firsthand in front of Vatican officials who now looked at her with mixture of compassion and expectation. Patricia retreated to her Vatican quarters, spreading her corrupted data across the desk while trying to rationalize what every witness had seen. Her scientific reports showed electromagnetic spikes that shouldn't exist, temperature readings that defied thermodynamics, and photographic evidence that captured light without source. She called colleagues in Rome, describing the phenomena in clinical terms, but her voice betrayed the uncertainty growing within her methodical mind. Cardinal Benedetti knocked softly on her door, entering with tea and gentle concern for her obvious distress. He had witnessed dozens of miracles during his 40 years of service, but understood how devastating such encounters could be for those who built their lives on empirical evidence alone. Patricia confessed that her instruments had recorded impossible data, that her photographs showed luminosity patterns that violated optical physics, that her electromagnetic readings suggested the presence of energy fields unknown to current science. The cardinal listened without judgment as she struggled between professional skepticism and undeniable personal experience. Outside her window, pilgrims continued gathering at the altar where she had witnessed the apparition, their faces reflecting the same peace and certainty that now eluded her completely as evening shadows lengthened across Vatican courtyards. The phone call came at 3 a.m. while Patricia reviewed her impossible data for the 100th time. Her sister's voice broke through international static with news that shattered her scientific focus completely. Her 80-year-old nephew Michael had collapsed during soccer practice, rushed to emergency surgery for a brain aneurysm that doctors described as critical and unpredictable. Patricia's hands shook as she packed her equipment, preparing to abandon the Vatican investigation for a family crisis that demanded her immediate presence in Boston. Cardinal Benedetti found her in the chapel at dawn, kneeling before the same altar where she had witnessed the apparition just days earlier. She wasn't praying, she insisted, merely trying to find calm before her flight home to face a situation where her scientific training offered no solutions or comfort. The cardinal knelt beside her in silent understanding, recognizing the desperation of someone whose rational worldview provided no resources for navigating helplessness and fear. Patricia stared at the marble where the Virgin Mary had appeared, wondering if the peace she saw in pilgrims' faces might somehow extend to families facing medical crises beyond human control, beyond the reach of empirical knowledge and clinical expertise that had always defined her identity and purpose. Patricia paced Boston Children's Hospital corridors, while Michael remained unconscious after 12 hours of surgery. Her sister Sarah looked exhausted, surrounded by family members who whispered prayers and held rosary beads, while Patricia felt completely useless with her scientific degrees and rational explanations. The neurosurgeon spoke in clinical terms about intracranial pressure and surgical complications, language Patricia understood perfectly, but that offered no comfort when applied to her nephew's fragile 80-year-old life. She called Cardinal Benedetti from the hospital chapel, surprising herself by seeking his voice across the ocean while Michael's condition remained critical and unpredictable. The cardinal listened to her desperation, her confession that all her education and professional expertise meant nothing when facing a child's mortality, her growing understanding that some realities existed beyond the reach of empirical measurement and scientific control. Patricia found herself staring at the small crucifix above the hospital altar, remembering the impossible light she had witnessed at the Vatican, wondering if the peace that filled pilgrims' faces might somehow extend to sterile hospital rooms where families waited for miracles that medical science couldn't guarantee or explain through any rational framework she had learned to trust. Michael's condition worsened during the third night as Patricia sat alone in the intensive care waiting room, her family having gone home to rest while she maintained her vigil through sheer stubborn determination. The monitors showed declining brain activity that medical staff described with increasing concern, their clinical language barely masking the gravity of a situation slipping beyond surgical intervention and pharmaceutical solutions. Patricia stared at her phone, scrolling through emails from Vatican colleagues who continued documenting miraculous healings at the altar she had tried to debunk with electromagnetic readings and photographic evidence. Her nephew's pale face reminded her of the marble statue she had analyzed so methodically, both beautiful and fragile beyond her ability to protect or preserve through scientific means. She found herself whispering words she hadn't spoken since childhood, half-forgotten prayers her grandmother had taught her before rational thinking replaced childish faith in her academic development. The hospital chapel remained open all night, its simple wooden pews occupied by other desperate families who found comfort in candlelight and sacred silence that Patricia's education had taught her to dismiss as psychological coping mechanisms rather than legitimate sources of hope or healing in impossible circumstances. Patricia knelt in the hospital chapel at 4 a.m, her scientific pride finally shattered by 3 days of watching her nephew slip away despite the best medical intervention available. She spoke aloud to the darkness, addressing the Virgin Mary whose apparition she had tried so desperately to disprove with instruments and measurements that now seemed foolishly inadequate. Her words came haltingly at first, then poured out in desperate confession of her arrogance, her stubborn refusal to acknowledge mysteries beyond empirical understanding, her need for help that no doctoral degree or professional credential could provide. The chapel remained silent, but Patricia felt something shifting within her hardened skepticism as she remembered the impossible warmth of Vatican marble, the luminous figure that had appeared despite her attempts at scientific debunking. She prayed for Michael's healing with the same intensity she had once applied to disproving miracles, offering her career, her reputation, her entire rational worldview in exchange for her nephew's recovery. Morning light began filtering through stained glass windows as Patricia remained kneeling, no longer the confident investigator who had arrived at the Vatican weeks earlier, but simply a desperate aunt willing to believe in possibilities her education had taught her to reject completely. Patricia woke to urgent voices as medical staff rushed into Michael's room, their equipment registering brain activity that defied every projection they had made during the previous 72 hours. Her nephew's eyes opened for the first time since surgery, clear and focused, while monitors displayed neurological readings that made the attending physician call for immediate additional testing. Sarah grabbed Patricia's hand as Michael smiled weakly, his first words asking for water and wondering why everyone looked so worried about him sleeping so long. The neurosurgeon arrived within minutes, examining Michael with growing amazement as cognitive tests revealed no impairment from the massive aneurysm that had threatened his life just hours earlier. Patricia watched the medical team struggle to explain recovery patterns that violated everything they understood about brain trauma and surgical outcomes, their scientific training as inadequate as hers had been in the Vatican chapel. She thought of Cardinal Benedetti, of the impossible electromagnetic readings, of the luminous figure that had appeared when she tried to debunk reported miracles with instruments and measurements. Michael squeezed her hand, his 80-year-old grip strong and healthy, while doctors whispered about unprecedented healing that medical literature couldn't explain through any known therapeutic intervention or natural recovery process. Patricia called Cardinal Benedetti from Michael's hospital room, her voice trembling with gratitude and newfound understanding as she described her nephew's impossible recovery to the man who had shown such patience with her scientific skepticism. The cardinal listened with gentle joy, recognizing the transformation in Patricia's tone as she spoke about witnessing healing that transcended every medical explanation her education had taught her to trust completely. She confessed her arrogance in attempting to debunk Vatican miracles with instruments designed to measure physical phenomena, while remaining blind to spiritual realities that operated beyond empirical detection and scientific analysis. Michael played quietly with toys brought by relieved family members, his complete recovery serving as living testimony to divine intervention that Patricia could no longer dismiss as coincidence or natural healing processes. She asked Cardinal Benedetti about returning to complete her investigation, but with entirely different intentions than the debunking mission that had brought her to the Vatican weeks earlier. Her sister Sarah watched Patricia's face transform as she spoke about mysteries beyond measurement, about healing that required faith rather than clinical understanding, about the humbling recognition that some truths existed far beyond the reach of doctoral degrees and professional credentials she had once considered sufficient for understanding reality itself. Patricia knelt at the Vatican altar where her investigation had begun, but instead of setting up scientific equipment, she offered heartfelt apology for treating sacred space like a laboratory experiment requiring empirical proof and rational explanation. Cardinal Benedetti welcomed her return with warm embrace, recognizing the humbled woman who had replaced the confident skeptic who arrived weeks earlier with instruments designed to debunk reported miracles. She volunteered to help restore areas of the chapel that had been disturbed during her investigation, working alongside Vatican maintenance staff who had watched her transformation with quiet amazement and growing respect. Patricia scrubbed marble surfaces with reverent care, polishing the altar where pilgrims continued experiencing daily apparitions while she learned to approach mystery with wonder rather than scientific skepticism. Her new report documented healing testimonies rather than electromagnetic anomalies, recording personal accounts of transformation and grace instead of temperature readings and photographic analysis that missed spiritual realities completely. Visiting pilgrims approached Patricia with stories of their own miraculous experiences, finding in her someone who understood both rational doubt and divine intervention through personal encounter rather than academic study. She spent hours listening to testimonies that her previous methodology would have dismissed, now recognizing the profound truth contained in experiences that transcended empirical measurement and clinical documentation. Patricia found herself counseling other skeptical investigators who arrived at the Vatican with the same scientific arrogance she had carried weeks earlier. Understanding their resistance to phenomena that challenged rational worldviews built on empirical evidence and academic credentials. A journalist from London questioned miracle reports with cynical determination, dismissing eyewitness testimonies as mass hysteria until Patricia shared her nephew's medical records alongside her own transformation from debunker to believer through personal crisis. She helped organize interfaith discussions where scientists, theologians, and pilgrims explored the intersection of reason and faith without demanding that one perspective invalidate the other completely. Cardinal Benedetti invited Patricia to address Vatican conferences about approaching mystery with both intellectual honesty and spiritual openness, recognizing her unique ability to speak to minds trained in scientific method while remaining humble before divine intervention. Her presentations attracted researchers from universities across Europe who struggled to reconcile professional skepticism with unexplained phenomena they had witnessed during their own investigations of reported miracles. Patricia discovered profound fulfillment in helping others navigate the same crisis of understanding she had experienced, offering hope to academics whose rigid thinking had isolated them from transcendent possibilities that required both intellectual integrity and faith-based acceptance of mysteries beyond human comprehension. Patricia stood before the altar where her transformation began, now serving as Vatican liaison for investigators who arrived seeking rational explanations for phenomena that transcended scientific measurement and empirical analysis. Her nephew Michael visited during school holidays, his vibrant health serving as living testimony to healing that medical professionals still couldn't explain through conventional understanding of neurological recovery after massive brain trauma. She maintained correspondence with researchers worldwide who had experienced similar conversions from skepticism to faith through encounters with unexplained miracles that challenged their academic foundations completely. The Vatican appointed Patricia to lead a new commission examining reported apparitions with both scientific rigor and spiritual reverence, recognizing her ability to approach mystery without sacrificing intellectual honesty or dismissing divine possibility. Cardinal Benedetti often joined her evening prayers at the sacred altar, both grateful for the journey that had transformed a proud debunker into a humble servant of truth beyond human comprehension. Patricia's story inspired countless others who struggled between professional training and spiritual longing, offering hope to minds imprisoned by rigid thinking that dismissed transcendent realities. Have you ever witnessed something that challenged everything you thought you knew? A moment when the impossible became undeniably real and forever changed your understanding of what's truly possible in this mysterious world we share together.